Hey everybody, cool. So I am here. I'm so excited. We do a lot of pitch sessions and classes and webinars, but there's really one person over anybody that inspires me more than anybody else, and it's Howard Rosenman, who's sitting right next to me, who I'm so happy to be doing this with us. And so we're going to start with I'm going to do a little introduction. We're going to ask him some questions that I have prepared. And then at the end, if you guys have any questions, you can just type it in the chat box and ask him any question you want. If you didn't see Call Me By Your Name, you have to see it and bring a lot of tissues. It is so good. It makes you want to move to Italy and just fall in love over and over again. And yeah, so basically Howard is a legend in the industry. He knows everybody. He is not only does he know everybody, but they respect him, and he is just accomplished so much. I feel so lazy compared to him. He's amazing. So I'm gonna pass it over to him. I'll have him just talk a little bit about himself. And then I'll ask him the first question, and then we'll go from there. Cool. Awesome. So here's Howard Rosenman.
Well, I've produced over 41 movies. I come from, my parents are Israeli. They're 7 generations born in Jerusalem. I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in the 5 towns and Jerusalem, went to medical school, volunteered in the 6-Day War. I met Leonard Bernstein, who convinced me to leave medical school, telling me, you're too much of a great storyteller. You'll never bow to the mistress of science. I eventually left medical school, came to New York, and he introduced me to Katharine Hepburn, his best friend, who was working on a Broadway musical called Coco, and I became her assistant. And then he introduced me to Stephen Sondheim, and then I met Barry Diller. And then I came out, then I worked at Ben& Bowles, making commercials, started winning Clios, came out to Hollywood to make a television movie for Barry Diller, and then sold my first idea to Robert Stigwood, who was the great manager of Eric Clapton, the Bee Gees, and Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. I started a company for him, made 5 television movies. Then I made Sparkle, which was the idea that I sold to Stigwood, with Joel Schumacher writing with me. Then I made The Main Event with Barbra Streisand. It made a lot of money. I was young, I was happening, I got into trouble. Then I made Resurrection. Then the AIDS crisis happened. All my friends were dying. And then I changed my wicked ways and came back to Hollywood anew and started all over again and made my first movie in this new incarnation called Lost Angels, a teenage cuckoo's nest with Adam Hurwitz of the Beastie Boys, that Hugh Hudson, who directed Chariots of Fire, directed. Then I made Gross Anatomy about my years in medical school. And then I started running a big company, Sand Dollar for Dolly Parton and Sandy Gallon, where I made a lot of movies. Father of the Bride, Stranger Among Us, Straight Talk, Common Threads, which was about the AIDS quilt, which won an Oscar and a Peabody, made a lot of movies. Then went to Burlstein Gray, made more movies. And then I made Family Man, and then I made a lot of more movies. And then last year, I made 2 movies, Call Me By Your Name in Milan, which is now up for 4 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Song by Sufjan Stevens. And then I made a movie that I just came back from Budapest, based on an Israeli novel. It's called Shepherd, about a German shepherd that saves a little Jewish boy from a concentration camp. That, in short, is my broad stroke.
Oh, I'm actually going to do it this way because I like sitting next to you. My Jesus Christ, I'm like in shock right now. That's amazing. You probably don't remember this, but I have to share this story about Howard really quickly. This is probably like 5 years ago. Maybe like 5 years ago. So I was going to see the premiere of Doubt with a mutual friend, Kevin Houvain, who's the head of CAA. And we went, me and Kevin, and, so many people there. And, Kevin was very polite to everybody. Just, hello, nice to see you, nice to see you. But when he saw Howard Rosenman, he lit up. And that's the kind of power that Howard has. Like, he just lights up the room. He makes people feel so comfortable. And his reputation is amazing. So I just had to share that story. It's one of my favorite stories. So kind of segueing into that, like you said, you've worked with some of the biggest actors, actresses, filmmakers of all time. What are some of the biggest perks and struggles trying to appease so many of these high profile people. Some of them might be divas or not, but just I'm so curious how you just deal with these kind of powerhouses.
Well, it's hard, actually. It's a producer has to have so many attributes. He has to be tenacious. He has to have passion. He has to understand story. He has to know how to put people together. He has to make people play together well in the sandbox. But most of all, he has to appeal to these great egos. I'll tell you a great story. Do I have a few minutes?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'll tell you a great story. I was making a movie called Resurrection with Ellen Burstyn. And my parents are Israeli, and I went to Jerusalem to visit my parents in 1975. I went to the Old City, the Via Dolorosa, the street where Christ carried the cross, the 7 stations of the cross, and I was at the 6th station of the cross, and I looked down at the 7th, and I saw a woman in a halation. I said to myself, what if God came back as a woman? And so I sold the idea to I had a girlfriend when I was doing that sort of thing, and Kitty Hawkes, who was the daughter of the great director Howard Hawks, who directed To Have and Have Not and The Big Sleep. And I introduced her to my best friend, who was the head of the studio, Ned Tannen, who she'd married. And so Kitty sold the idea to Ned. Eventually, long story short, we got the right screenplay. Ned said to me, I'm only going to make this movie if you get Ellen Burstyn. She was then a triple Crown winner. She won an Emmy, an Oscar, and a Tony. I'll only make the movie if you get Ellen. Ellen rejected it 7 times. I eventually flew to Athens on my own dime. She was making a movie with Melina Mercouri, and convinced her to do it after we went to the temple of Aphrodite at Cnidus, and she bowed to the goddess, and the goddess told her to do the movie, and she did the movie. And then we were Ned said, I'll give you $7 million to make the movie. We were in Texas shooting the movie. We were in the 5th week, and things were going well. I was so close to Ellen that we actually rented a house and slept together in the same bed platonically. We were so close, lunch, breakfast, dinner every single day. And on the Thursday night before the last night we were to leave Texas, Ellen said to me, I'd like to see the set. She'd never asked me that before. So I took her to the set. We walked down, it was a bar scene with Ellen Burstyn and Sam Shepard. She walks down the set, she stops at the end, she looks at the bar, she walks out, she asked me to come to her Winnebago. She says to me, I can't shoot in the set. I said, what do you mean? She said, there's a sign that says no women allowed. I said, oh, we'll take away the sign. No. The karma. I said, what? I said, Ellen, you know about how complicated my relationship with this Ned. You know, his wife was my former girlfriend, who's now my agent. It's a very complicated relationship. You know all about this. If I'm $1 million over already, if I have to stay through the weekend, we'll be in golden time. I'll be $4 million over the movie. I'll never be able to work again. The next morning, needless to say, I didn't sleep in the room that night, in the house that night. Well, the next morning, a producer can't go to a set, can't get an actor by guild rules, only a UPM or DGA first AD or second AD can get the actor. Well, they went, Ellen wouldn't come. So I climbed up on the tree. The window on the 2nd floor was open. She sees me, she puts down the window shade. I take a rock, I break the window. Needless to say, we didn't eat together that day. We didn't speak. I was crazed because I thought I lost my best friend, and I did lose my best friend. At the end of the day, she invited me to her Winnebago, and she said, I have to apologize to you. She said to me, because with the gift comes the other side. And if you understand that about creative people and hold them in that way, you will be very successful, because with the gift comes the other side. And that's how I look at all creative people.
Wow, that's amazing. Don't piss off Howard. I have to ask you this question. I'm going up a little off script, just like hearing you going to Athens on your own dime and just hearing everything you've done, the ups and downs. I mean, you need so much passion and determination, and especially for up and coming writers who sometimes get rejected after rejection. It's like, where do you find that inner power just to keep going?
I'll tell you another story. Do I have?
Yeah, please. I love your stories.
the business is about 99.99999999999% rejection. You have to find the one schmuck to say yes. So it's not rocket science. It's passion. You have to love your material. You have to love your material so much that because you reject it so many times, and let me tell you something, from the moment of conception of idea till the moment of first dollar received, the average takes 7 years. Some take 20, some take 1. All of my movies that come out of my head have taken 7 years or 8 years, every single one. It's par for the cause. I'll tell you a story. I'm going to take a little cup of coffee because I'm dehydrated a little. My best friend in the 80s and 90s was David Geffen. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was a big record mogul. He started DreamWorks, and he was very successful. And in the 80s, Hollywood had changed a lot. I had changed a lot. I became much more responsible, stopped partying, and became aware that the only thing that was important was the work. And out of that came Father of the Bride and all my documentaries, Common Thread, Celluloid Closet, Paragraph 175, which won Oscars and Peabodys. I created a nonprofit called Project Angel Food, Meals on Wheels for AIDS and HIV people, which 2 months ago we served our 11 millionth meal.
Wow.
Started it 27 years ago with Marianne Williamson. Very proud of that. And in the mid-'80s, there was a communications workshop called LifeSpring. And I didn't really want to go. David went. He said it was very valuable. He pushed me into going, and I went. And my normal situation is when I go to a room or start a situation, I stand at the back of the room with my arms folded, judging everybody else. Eventually, I relax. I unfold my arms. I sit in the back row. Then I move up to the next row. I finally move up to the front row. And then I finally take over. And I become the leader. And that's what happened to me. I did the basic, which is 5 days, the advanced, which is another 5 days. And then I did the leadership training, which is 6 months, where you use the principles of the beginning and the advanced to learn how to put together a homeless feed, to learn how to put together various things. It's all about giving back, and it's all about being on time. It's all about passion. It's all about extending your comfort zone. It was great. Well, I was the head. And LifeSpring at the time, they had 50 of these things, leadership programs, and I was the 51st. And LifeSpring only devoted itself to homelessness. But at the times, AIDS was fulminating. And I decided that I was going to create a green room, because these parents would come in from Cuba and Venezuela and Poland to Cedars-Sinai and find out in one day in the halls of Cedars-Sinai that their young sons were gay and they were going to die. And there was all this screaming and caterwauling in the hallways. I wanted to create a room, a private enclave, so that the parents could speak to the doctors and the AIDS patients themselves could have a place to watch television and just relax and get away from it all. And I had to convince the leadership of the LifeSpring that I was going to go away from the homeless thing and do this AIDS thing. And they consented. I was the head of it. I called for a meeting. I was beloved. I was respected, okay, by everybody. I called for a meeting of 60 people that were in my leadership. No one came. Well, I was totally freaked out. I couldn't believe it. And I called up my friend David Geffen. And I said, you know something? No one, I call this meeting. I'm beloved. They respect me. I'm the leader. I finally took control of this. And no one showed up. I'm quitting. David said, let me tell you a story about my mother, Batya Geffen, who was born in Kiev in 1902. When she was 6 years old, she was walking to school with her books, and the Cossacks came. The Cossacks are Russian soldiers who were anti-Semitic and massacred and killed Jews at the time in pogroms. Well, the Cossacks came, and they pushed the 6-year-old Batya Geffen to the ground, and Batya Geffen fell, and her books fell around her, and Batya Geffen got up, picked up her books, dusted off her dress, and continued walking. Then the Cossacks came again, and they pushed Batya Geffen to the ground. Her books fell. Batya Geffen got up, collected her books, dusted off her dress, and continued walking. Then the Cossacks came again, and they pushed Batya Geffen to the ground. And she got up, and she dusted off her dress, and she picked up her books, and she walked all the way to Jerusalem, where she met my father, married him. They came to America, had me, and I'm a billionaire. Wow. That is the story of not only show business, but life. It's all about getting back on the fucking horse and getting up and continuing to ride, no matter how many times you're pushed down. That's it. Not rocket science.
Oh my God, I have goosebumps. I feel like all my questions are now so boring compared to your stories. I mean, that's incredible. Okay, so I kind of want to keep going off topic, but I'm going to focus back on this for a sec because I'll ask you some other questions later. Okay, let's talk about you've read a ton of scripts in your life, and you pick and choose which ones you want. I know for you, character is so important. Character is key. What do you look for in a protagonist that makes you want to sign on to a project?
Well, a protagonist has to have a goal and has to have a goal that they're aiming for. But every character, if you read Aristotle's Poetics, you'll understand that a character has a flaw. So every character has to have a flaw. And actors and directors read scripts for subtext, if you know what that means. There's a great example of subtext in the movie about Lillian Hellman and her husband, Dashiell Hammett, played by Jane Fonda and Vanessa Redgrave. I forget the name of the movie. It was a Fred Zinnemann movie. And there's a scene where Lillian Hellman and Dashiell Hammett are in the kitchen, and Lillian Hellman is scrambling eggs. And Jane Fonda plays Lillian Hellman, and she's talking about the scrambling of the eggs. But if you look at the scene, you'll understand that what she's talking about is their relationship. That's the subtext. And every great writer writes subtext, although the text is different. And a great writer will understand that. And that's what I look for. I look for a flaw so that the hero at the end of the second act, okay, where everything falls apart, has to overcome that which is his flaw. And the third act, thus give a boon to mankind, is the explication of the third act. Okay? It's very easy. So Hollywood follows that paradigm of the Poetics and Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. So I always look for a character that is strong or becomes strong. Character starts out angry and ends up not angry. A character starts out jealous and ends up not jealous. A character starts out selfish and ends up not selfish. That's what I look for in a protagonist.
So talking about segueing to Call Me By Your Name, when you read the book or read the screenplay, was his arc part of the reason why you came onto the project?
Yes. Timothy Chalamet's arc, the arc of Elio, was about a confused teenager in Italy. And the book is in 1987. The movie was in 1983. And he was very confused and he was very uncertain. And his sexuality was very liquid. But then in meeting Army, okay, Hammer, the 24-year-old intern, suddenly it solidified. First, he didn't trust him. Then he antagonized him. Then he realized that he really likes him, but he couldn't show it. And then it brought out his burgeoning passion for him and allowed him to really express his sexuality. So I bought the book 10 and a half years ago because of that and because of the scene with the father at the end of the movie where Michael Stolberg plays the father and he says to his son, treasure this moment. It's the only time you're ever going to have a first love. I wish I had done it when I had the chance. And it was so powerful and so moving. And then Michael Stolberg played it so brilliantly. And Luca Guadagnino directed it so brilliantly. And James Ivory wrote it so brilliantly that it has a gigantic impact. And that's why I think it became so resonant in the culture.
When people talk about the movie, they talk about that scene. Almost every time, the father talking to him, and it's just so relatable and fantastic. I watched it at the ArcLight, and at the end they had an interview recorded with the director, and the director was saying, so many financiers were saying, maybe make the mom the antagonist, maybe do this, do that, because it's so character driven and some might say small. So for you, and when writers get these notes over and over again about change this, change that, I'm sure you've gotten so many notes over the years. What how do you know when to trust your gut? Like, how do you know when you know, like, no, I'm going to stick to my guns and do this versus that's a good note? Sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of find the balance.
Actually, the most important thing for you guys is to listen to the creative executive or the VP of development or the senior VP of development. And if they're smart, most of these people out in Hollywood are very smart. I don't care what they tell you. They all went to Ivy League schools. They're all very, very smart, especially about structure, which is the single most important thing about movies. And if you haven't read Story by Robert McKee or Screenplay by what's his name? I forget the name of that book, which everybody uses. It's a paperback book, which gives you the outline of screen structure. It's very, very important.
Save
The
the
character
Cat.
is structure. What?
Save the Cat.
Save the Cat is another book that's
Okay.
also incredible to read. But there's another book called Screenplay. I forget the name
Okay.
of the guy. I'll remember in a minute. But the McKee book is really great. If you can take the McKee course, I've taken it 5 times,
Wow.
which is why I've made so many movies, to tell you the truth.
Mm.
But you have to trust your gut. Listen to these executives, and you'll know if the note is smart. And if the note is smart, incorporate it into your screenplay. It makes it better. What I always do when I have a pitch, I go around, I listen to their notes, I incorporate what they tell me into my pitch, and the next time my pitch is better. But if you suspect that this creative executive is stupid, or it goes against the grain of what you're thinking, you can follow your gut. But always listen and keep an open mind, because these guys are very, very smart.
Mm-hmm. I got another quick Howard story, but I've had a few, coffees with Howard and lunches and meetings and stuff, and he always has a piece of paper, and he's always taking notes. He's always listening. He's always taking notes. He's always learning. Even after all he's done, he's just always absorbing and taking and just kind of digesting everything, which I think is so fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit how Call Me By Your Name got off the ground?
I'm an actor now. I don't know if you know, but I was in Milk. It's a funny story. Gus Van Sant, when he was casting the part of David Goodstein, who I knew, who was a rich gay Jew who came to San Francisco in 1973 and bought The Advocate, which was the Time magazine of gay people. And he was very conservative. And Gus Van Sant, who I knew from around show business, said to Francine Maisler, who was the casting director, get me someone that looks like Howard Rosenman, that talks like Howard Rosenman, that acts like Howard Rosenman, has Howard Rosenman's vibe. And she said, let's get Howard Rosenman. And he said, can he act? So she called me up. She said, have you ever acted before? I said, yes. When I was 14, I did Henry Higgins in Hebrew in Camp Mossad, and Susan Koskowitz is my Eliza. And then she said, hey, do you want to act? And I said, I'd rather poke fucking Japanese needles in my eyes. The last fucking thing I want to do. So she said, the director really wants you. I said, I don't have the chops to work with Sean Penn. But my best friend is an agent named Brian Swartstrom, who represents Tilda Swinton and many, many Hollywood types. And he called me up and he said, how could you be so arrogant as not to want to audition for Gus Van Sant? You'll never get the part, but at least you'll know what it's like to audition. So I was very relaxed. I auditioned. I got the part. On the set of Milk, and I was in 10 scenes. I was up there for 8 weeks. And I was Sean Penn's antagonist. I get a call from my close friend, an Israeli, who said to me, I just read a book, a manuscript, that has your name written all over it. And you're a fan of the writer. The writer wrote a book, a nonfiction book called Out of Egypt, about his Sephardic Alexandrian Jewish roots that you love. And the writer mentioned you to me, and he's my friend, and it has your name written all over it. So I said, send it. So I read it. Well, it was about a gay Jew. Hello. And so I started negotiations immediately, but the agent was negotiating with another writer at the time. She wouldn't tell us who. But eventually I convinced the agent, with Peter Spears, who was Brian Swartzum's husband, to give us the rights. And then it was a 10-and-a-half-year journey. So we hired this writer. He wrote a draft. He was supposed to direct it, but we couldn't set it up with him as a director. That took about 2 or 3 years. Then we attached about 4 or 5 different directors. Meanwhile, we went to Luca Guadagnino as a consultant, because he had a company in Milan called Frenesy Productions to do scouting locations. And so we asked him to be a consultant. Then he got so involved, he became an executive producer. Then he became a producer. And then we introduced him, Peter and Brian, introduced him to James Ivory. And they were going to co-write it and co-direct it, and they did co-write it and co-direct it. They did co-write it, but then by dint of something, James Ivory couldn't direct it, and Luca had it spaced before he was doing Suspiria. He had 8 weeks, and so he directed it, and it was luck. And so it's like capturing lightning in a bottle. Had we made it 8 years ago, it wouldn't have been this movie. Had we made it with another director, it wouldn't have been this movie. And so a lot of this is luck, and a lot of this is capturing lightning in a bottle.
And we all want to move to Milan and live in a castle. So, okay, I'm going to ask, I'll ask the questions on here first, and I'll ask another question later. How has the movie business changed since you started?
The movie business has changed gigantically. When I came to Hollywood in 1973 to make my first TV movie at ABC for Barry Diller, there was 7 studios and 3 networks. There are so there were 10 buyers of content. There are now 150 buyers of content. That's eventually going to coalesce. Okay, there'll eventually be 50. Okay, but for the next 5 years, for content creators, producers, writers, and directors, it's going to be the golden age, because there's so many places where you could sell your material who buy content, and there are also a lot more platforms. There's TV, there's cable, there's streaming, there's studios. But now what's happening is that the studios are coalescing. So Disney just bought Fox, okay, which is going to be a mega studio. I think, and this is my instinct, they're going to buy Sony, because Sony has a Marvel character, Spider-Man. And they bought Fox because that has Marvel characters. So they'll gobble up. So there'll be this one big entity, Disney, Sony, Fox. Then Warner Brothers will combine with MGM, because MGM has the Warner Brothers library. And then there'll be Paramount, which might combine with Lionsgate. So eventually there'll be 3 big loci of studios that will make the big tentpole movies. But then Hulu and Amazon and Netflix and all these other streaming things and all these other various, anybody that has a brand is going to be delivering content. And so you guys are very, very lucky, because you'll be able to sell anything you want anywhere.
Wow, cool. I want to ask. I have to ask you this question, because you know so many people, and you've just built so many connections over the years. I remember one of the first pieces of advice you gave to me, because I emailed you. I'm like, I want advice how to like get ahead and like meet people. And at the time when I first came out here, I was trying to like go to like the Kevin Houvains and trying to bypass all these other to try to go to the top. And you told me, hang out with people on your level. And to me, I was like, I thought that was so empowering to me, because I was trying to bypass all these steps and try to go to those people, but it's really the people you grow up with. I know you've told me stories how when you were starting out, like you, Whoopi Goldberg, Madonna would just go to all these clubs and parties. So to writers who maybe don't live in Los Angeles and maybe don't even live in the States, what advice would you give to a writer that's out of California, maybe even out of the country, to build connections?
Well, in every city in the world, there are always agents. In London, there are agents. In France, there are agents. And even in Chicago and in Florida, there are always agents. But don't get to know the most important person in that field. I'll tell you a great story. In 1987, I was running a big company called Sandollar, which was owned by Dolly Parton and Sandy Gallen. And the sister company to that company was a management company, Gallen Morey. And I always worked for managers. My first guy that I started a company for was Robert Stigwood, who managed the careers of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice and the Bee Gees and Eric Clapton. And so I had a power locus outside of the production company, which helped me a lot. With Sandollar, Gallen Morey, the management company, they managed the careers of Barbra Streisand, Dolly Parton, Neil Diamond, Whoopi Goldberg, Richie Pryor, Michael Jackson. All those people in concert, they threw off $300 million a year in all endeavors of their creative endeavors. In California, managers can't make deals, only agents can by law. So we pushed everybody to CAA. At the time, they were the most powerful agents in town, Mike Ovitz. In essence, we were writing a check every year to Mike Ovitz for $30 million. So Mike had a deal with me, but he had 50 other schmucks just like me that he had to deal with and cater to. But I knew how to press the levers of power judiciously such that I got so many movies made. Now, I tell you this story about, I got a call from Eddie Lamato, who was then the head of talent at ICM, International Creative Management, since 1987. And he said to me, there's a young guy on my desk, his name is Ari Emanuel.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a young agent. He speaks Hebrew. You'll get along with him. He works for a big company. You run a big company. You can exchange information. You'll get along with him because you both have this Israeli background. He'll call you, go out and have breakfast with him. So Ari and I started to have breakfast. He was 22 years old. We had breakfast once every 3 months. 2 years later, I was in New York. I had an apartment on 9th Street and 3rd Avenue. And every morning I would have breakfast at the Kiev Deli on 5th Street and 2nd Avenue, 6th Street and 2nd Avenue. One Monday morning, in walks the young Ari Emanuel. What are you doing here? He said, oh, I'm here for a meeting tomorrow. I said, what are you doing today? He said, oh, I don't have any plans. Good. You're going to go to the movies with me, and then I'll take you to all my meetings, and then I'll take you to a big party tonight. So we went to see Goodfellas, the Martin Scorsese movie. When we walked out of the movie, Ari turned to me and said, one day I'm going to represent that director, who was Marty Scorsese, then one of the most important directors in the world. And I looked at him and I said, whoa, this kid's ambitious. Then I took him to a meeting with Barry Diller, who's the head of Gulf and Western and the head of Paramount. And I introduced the young Ari Emanuel as the next Mike Ovitz, who was the most important agent in town. Then I took him to a party at Deanne von Furstenberg's house, who I later introduced to Barry Diller, and they got married, who was my best friend at the time. Ari and I were the least important people there, but everybody there, Henry Kissinger, Bob Evans, Warren Beatty, Madonna, Whoopi Goldberg, I introduced the young Ari Emanuel as the next Mike Ovitz. Cut to 5 years ago, Ari Emanuel calls me. He says, guess where I am? I said, what city are you in? New York. I said, you're at the Kiev Deli. He said, bingo. That was the day I realized that I could be the next Mike Ovitz because guys like you took me under their wing. And so it's now payback time. I want you in my office in 2 weeks with an idea and I'll sell it. And that's how John from Cincinnati, a series that David Milch, happened because Ari sold it to HBO. So I tell you this story because it's important for you guys not to know the biggest guys, the biggest stars, but to know the young ones who are aspiring in New York, in Tennessee, in Nashville, in London, in Miami. There are always young agents and young people that are starting out. Get to know them. They're the important people because you'll grow with them.
I literally can't breathe. I'm like, so I was like goosebumps all over my body. Okay, so I know you've done like a few pitch sessions with us, and I know you've heard tons of pitches over the years. What are some of the biggest pitfalls writers fall into when pitching a project?
Writers don't know how to pitch, ever. Most producers don't know how to pitch. And so I teach a course in pitching now at the new Brooklyn College Film School. It's over 15 weeks. So it's a long, long haul. But the most important thing is less is more, okay? Understand your theme. If you don't understand the theme, it won't sell. Practice your pitch 1,000,000 times. Make it less than 5 minutes. Make it 3 minutes, okay? And then let the buyer question you. Less is more is the single most important thing. Passion is very important. Charisma is important. If you don't have charisma, find a partner who does, okay? Because you'll never sell it, okay? Otherwise, because it's show business, okay? Show, it's important. Those are just some of the pitfalls. A lot of writers, they start out and they say, well, my hero went to the door and he opened up the door, and then he closed the door, and then he went outside. I'm not interested in any of that bullshit. I get to the fucking point. Make sure it's crystal clear. Less is more. Figure it out. Rehearse. I usually rehearse for 6 months with my partner, Carol Baum, to get a pitch correctly. They say that I'm the best pitcher in Hollywood, but I rehearse millions of times to get it right.
I love it. Okay, if you guys want to start typing in your questions, I have a couple more questions, but if you guys want to start typing in your questions, I'll ask it to Howard in a bit. I remember me and my brother went to see your course, The Hollywood Sell, at the Alayola.
Yes,
Yeah, like, oh
right.
yeah. And I remember you, I mean, first off, just watching like the Julia Robert audition and like all this stuff is just like amazing. I remember you talking about when you go in, you know, having like you saying charm, like having just don't go in just as a robot, but going in as a human, having some kind of story prepared. I remember you had like a story about a pen. I don't remember something about I forgot what it was exactly, but it was very it was
What do you mean a pen?
I forgot I have to remember. It was something about I forgot. Like you took out a pen and you were going like this, and it was part of a story.
Oh, I know what it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was
Yeah,
so
right.
funny.
I know what it was.
Okay, so I want to ask this question, even though I know these are primarily writers, but I think it's important for writers to get more into the producers' state of mind, since you're going to be dealing with a lot of producers over the years, hopefully. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to any aspiring producer?
Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. Any aspiring producer, first of all, he has to believe in his material. If he invents it himself, or finds a screenplay, or finds a book, or finds an article, or finds a record, you know, I could look into a garbage pail and come up with a story. And if you understand the basics of structure, and structure is character, and you have a good protagonist, and you figure out how to pitch it, you've got to believe thematic. It's what I tell writers and producers, it's the same thing. Believe in your material. Believe in your material, have passion, because out here they could detect passion and they could detect fear and they could detect desperation and they don't like it. So you have to be confident and you have to make sure that you believe in your material. You have to make sure that you understand the theme. I told this to you, less is more. I can't knock that into you enough. And so, and again, the most important thing is to be able to get up on the horse after you kick down and continue riding. Get up on the horse after you kick down and continue riding. It's not rocket science, but it's very important for you guys to understand the elements of storytelling. And you can get that from the book Screenplay or the book Story by Robert McKee, and take a course or just read Aristotle's Poetics and you'll get the whole thing.
Cool. I have two last questions, then I'll go to your questions. Is make sure this is okay, cool. Yeah, then we'll go into the questions that you guys are typing in. The first one is for you I mean, reading so many scripts, do you feel like lately there's been a trend to a certain kind of genre more than other ones, or certain kind of story over the other one? Just kind of looking at the best picture nominees, there's so much about love and relationships, and it's a lot of them are so character driven. Do you feel like there's some trends happening recently?
You know, I never look at that. I never look at trends ever, ever, ever. Because because every time I've developed a movie, there've always been 4 or 5 movies that are being developed with the same theme. And everybody says to me, oh my God, they're doing Gross Anatomy in this other studio. They're doing Resurrection at this other studio. They're doing The Main Event at this other studio. Well, I always say, fuck them. I follow my heart, I follow my material, and I develop. And then usually those other movies either fall apart or 2 movies get made. Father of the Bride. There was a movie called, it was with Alan Alda, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Betsy's Wedding. Jeffrey made it. And so when I bought the rights to Father of the Bride, everybody said to me, oh, that movie was made. But when I got Father of the Bride, Jeffrey Katzenberg said, you own the rights to Father of the Bride. That's a brand. I'm going to make it. Fuck Betsy's Wedding. And so that's where it's at. I don't follow trends. Never, ever, ever. The big movie studios are going to make the tentpole movies, the Marvel comics, the big graphic novels. But I don't concentrate on that. I concentrate on movies that I relate to, movies that I care about, projects that I'm empathetic with. I never follow trends because trends change. Every minute they change. And the movies that are popular now, you know, they always say, oh, well, the big hit, everybody's going to try to emulate Call Me By Your Name now, you know, and they're never going to do it, okay? But love stories always work. Thriller, you know, genres always work. I mean, it's always about the character and it's always about the underlying material if you are invested in it. If you care about the characters, you've got to care about those people. That's what makes a movie relatable and a hit.
Cool. But I love when you get a phone call because you literally never know who it could be. It could literally be anybody. Okay, so Bill has a question. Would the relationship dynamic in Call Me by Your Name worked if the principals were a young woman and a slightly older man?
Sure. Why not? It wouldn't be the same movie. It would be a different movie, and it wouldn't be on the edge. But there are a billion movies made about younger women and older men. Always Lolita. Hello. Okay. So I mean, yeah, but not. The dynamic would be very, very different.
Weird question. And this is for you. I always feel like whenever I'm around, you always ask these questions about inspiration and powerful people. You just, especially recently with the Academy Awards, you're going to luncheons and all these award shows and festivals, and you're around all these, I mean, the biggest of the big. What is, I mean, what are some common traits these people have, including yourself? I mean, you talked about before about passion, that you would kind of tell up and coming writers, producers to kind of mirror and try to mirror?
I had a very tough father who was an Orthodox Jew and Israeli, and he found out that I was gay when I was 4. He was tender to me up until that time, but when he found out that I was gay, he kind of psychologically beat up on me and even physically beat up on me, and I became very, very hardened. I was a thick-glassed, little Jewish boy, skinny, who wasn't into athletics. I was always reading about the kings and queens of England. But what happened was my father's resistance to me turned me into a very tough guy, because he would say red, I would say blue. He would say do this, and I would say fuck you. And it turned me into a very, very tough person. Eventually, my father and I reconciled in the 80s, and I had a good relationship with him in those years until he passed. But I became a very, very tough guy, which was very, very good, because I became very hardened. And that was good, because I wouldn't take shit from anybody. And when the bullies tried to bully me, I out-bullied them. And even when I became a producer, it was people started to bully me, I would scare the fucking shit out of them, okay? And they never bothered with me. No one ever bullied me. What was the question? What's the trait?
Yeah.
So the traits are passion. The most important trait is ambition. The most important trait is to want to create good things, okay? Want to turn the world into a better place. Never take no for an answer. And that's what was great about my father's resistance to me, is I became this guy that the authorities would say no, and I would say, well, fuck you, I'm gonna do this. I like it when people say no to me. You know why? Because I could say, really? Fuck you, I'm gonna show you the way. And I noticed that most of successful people have that trait as well.
When you pitch, do you pitch from back/beginning to end with as much detail as possible, while still staying under 5 minutes, or do you leave much of the details out and focus on the themes and set pieces?
I tell the story as shortly and concisely as I can, leaving out the details. They're not interested in the details. These executives that you're pitching to are very busy, okay? They have 200 people on their phone sheets. They have kids. They have got to pick them up. They have personal lives. They have 1,000 things to do. They can't even listen to you. And the story that Joey told you about the pen was, if you're in a pitch and you notice the studio executive is clicking on his pen, you know that he's not paying attention. So get it concise, leave out the details, and then let them question you. And in the questioning, you can give them details, but not too much detail.
Do you have any pitching stories that you can share? You pitching to somebody, or somebody pitching to you, that kind of stand out as like a big do or big don't?
What do you mean?
Just like in your career, is any like milestone pitches that you think went very well for a particular reason, or a pitch that maybe didn't go so well for a particular reason?
No, because I learned early on to be. I'll give you an example of a great pitch.
Okay.
There's a Sasha Guitry movie called Life of an Honest Man, which I want to remake. And it's about a very rich man, and And when the movie opens, he's very unfulfilled emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and financially. He's married to a woman who's a nag. He has a son who's a drug addict, a daughter who's a Jap, Jewish American princess. And he has an identical twin brother that died. Well, one day, his secretary calls him up and says, there's a man standing in front of me who looks exactly like you. And he says he's your identical twin brother, but he's dressed like a homeless person. The rich man turns to his wife and says, well, remember, I told you that my twin brother died when he was 21. What happened was he slept with my then fiance. I said to him, I want everything to do with you. I made him as if he's dead. He's not really dead. He came back. I guess I have to meet him. He goes to the office. He gets out of the elevator and he sees his bum brother talking to his secretary. So charming as his bum brother. And the secretary is laughing hysterically, whereas when the rich man passes by, she shuts down. The rich man is in the office, summons his brother. What do you want? He says to his bum brother. The bum brother says, I'm 43 years old, and like our father, I have a heart condition. I'm coming, my doctor say I have to settle down in one place. I'm coming to you, my rich brother, to ask you for some money. The rich brother looks at him and says, you fucked me over once, I'm not interested. Get out. Okay, I want to have nothing to do with you. And the bum brother leaves. But as the bum brother leaves, it's like he's so charming, he's throwing fairy dust at everyone. Whereas when the rich brother passes by, everyone shuts their door in fear. The rich brother goes home. He's haunted by this, comes to work the next early, leaves uncharacteristically early and goes to the bad side of town, to the sleazy motel that his brother's staying in, and says to his brother, listen, I've thought about this. Okay? I own an apartment complex outside of the city. Okay? I'll give you an apartment rent-free and a monthly stipend if you take care of the whole building. The poor brother looks at him and says, you know, I didn't think I was going to end up in some bumfuck town of nowhere being a janitor. And then grabs his heart and has a heart attack. The rich brother rushes over, tries to give him mouth to no avail. Then the rich brother, who was in distress, sits for a minute at his desk, takes out a pen and paper, and writes a will leaving all his money to his bum brother. He puts that will in his bum brother's jacket pocket. He takes the jacket with the bum brother, with the will leaving all the money to the bum brother, and puts it on himself and puts his jacket on the bum brother. He calls his wife, and he says to his wife, I have terrible news for you, but your husband, my rich brother, just died and left me all his money. End of Act 1. Beginning of Act 2, he goes to his own funeral, and there's no one there. And his wife's having an affair with his COO, and his kids are chewing gum, and they're not even interested. And he decides that he's going to live his bum brother's life during the course of the second act. And what he learns about is caring and sharing, such that by the end of the second act, when his life seems to fall apart, he decides to use all the knowledge that he gets to overcome that which is his flaw, and then goes back to his wife to re-woo his wife and solve the problem of his children.
Amazing. Love it. Can you guys, this sounds good, right? I know somebody was saying before, it looks like it's better now. So cool. Okay. Since you, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Linda. So you've done TV and features. What is the difference in pitching TV?
Well, TV is really about character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, features are, you have to have plot. In television series, if you're doing a miniseries, it has to have plot. If you're doing a historical thing, it has to have plot. But comedy series are all about character, as a drama series. They are enveloped in whatever the plot is, whether it's CSI, whether it's a drama, whether it's a murder mystery. But it's all about the characters, which is so interesting. Character is everything in TV.
Cool. What are some, as a producer, after hearing a pitch, what are some of the most common questions you'll ask a writer after they pitch their story?
Why are you interested in this material? How does this relate to you? How are you empathetic with this material? Why are you passionate about this material? Why am I going to believe that you, as the writer, will have to go through 100 drafts and 100 rejections and still come out on the other side at the end, still with an optimistic result, wanting to make this movie? Those are the questions I ask. When I came back to Hollywood in 1984, 85, in my new incarnation, and decided that I was only going to do movies that mean something to me. Because I came out to Hollywood in 1973 to make a Barbra Streisand movie, to become famous, to get my name in bold print in the Gossip Columnist, to be invited to the best parties, to have the best tables at the restaurants. And I did all that. I achieved all of those things. And then when I look back at it, I said, is that all there is? And then all my friends started to die of AIDS in 81, 82. My doctor, I had a spot on my hand that was very, very wild. And the doctor told me I had AIDS.
Oh.
Sell your house, wrap up your affairs, you're going to die. So I went to Israel to die, but I didn't die. But I had symptoms. I had diarrhea and fainting and sweating. And I went to a doctor in Tel Aviv, and he said to me, you know, two things. If you have the virus, it's a very attenuated form of the virus. You're not going to die of this. And secondly, you have a lactose intolerance, the symptoms of which mimic AIDS, sweating, diarrhea, and fainting. Go back to Hollywood, start making movies. So when I had this epiphany, I said to myself, you know something? Fuck all that other stuff. It's really not important. What's really important is the work itself. And out of that came all the movies that I made: Father of the Bride, Family Man, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I made 5 documentaries. I made Common Threads about the AIDS quilt, which won an Oscar and a Peabody. I made Cellular Closet, nominated for an Oscar, won a second Peabody. I made Paragraph 175 about gays in the Holocaust, nominated for 100 awards. Then I made a documentary about rape called Brave Miss World, which I sold to Netflix, which was nominated for an Emmy. All my important work came out of that. And then my Project Angel Food came out of that. And so that's been my life now. It's all about the work. What was the question? Julia Roberts. Sorry. Okay. So when I came back to Hollywood in 1985, I had this idea, because when I came back to Hollywood, everybody in 1985, all the powers that be said, oh, Howard Rosenman, he's a party boy and a drug addict, don't trust him. And I felt that I was like an institution. I felt that I was in an insane asylum. So I created this story about an upper middle class boy who was put into an insane asylum against his will. And the only way that he could get out was to kill the head of the institution. And it was a script called Lunatics, which is a great script. Hugh Hudson, the director of Chariots of Fire, read the script and decided to do it. And it was a movie that was then called Lunatics. And then I made it, which was called Lost Angels, with Adam Hurwitz of the Beastie Boys and Donald Sutherland. But when we were auditioning for the part of the young girl, who was Adam Hurwitz's love interest, she was a 17-and-a-half-year-old girl, and we were auditioning for a lot of girls. One day, this young girl comes in who's 17 and a half years old. Her name was Julia. And she had frizzy hair, and she was a little overweight, and she had a gap between her teeth. And this never happened to me before or since. But when she auditioned, my heart went out to her. And I said to myself, wow, this girl's really talented. And the director said to me, she's too old. But I went over to the girl and I said to her, Julia, go home, write a diary as if you're this girl. Come back tomorrow, and I'll get the director to video you reading from the diary as if you were this girl, which I did. And her name was Julia Roberts, okay? And I had that tape. Well, needless to say, she didn't get the part, but Julia and I got very close. I helped her with the managers. I helped her with the head sheets. And then she did a movie about a rock and roll girl. Then she did Mystic Pizza. Then she became, she did a movie with my boss, Dolly Parton, called Steel Magnolias. And the director, Herb Ross, who was a fucking asshole. There's always a director who tortures the actor on the set, finds the most vulnerable actor on the set and tortures them. And Herb Ross did this with Julia, and Dolly loved Julia, and Dolly was my boss. And I used to make fun of Herb Ross, and I would imitate him because he was very grand, and he was a big queen, and I used to imitate him. And Dolly loved my imitation. So Dolly calls me from Tennessee and says to me, you know, Herb Ross is picking on your mentee, Julia Roberts. I call up Herb Ross, and I say to Herb Ross, if you continue picking on my mentee, I'll come down to Nashville and break your fucking neck. He stopped picking on her. Naturally, Julia and I got even closer. Julia then made 2 movies with Joel Schumacher, who was my close friend. My mother got very close to Julia. She was invited to the set. And Julia and I became very close friends. And everybody in Hollywood during the 80s and 90s knew that Julia and I were so close. So all the agents were always hitting on me because they all wanted to represent Julia and take away from her agents. And so it made me very, very powerful. And even though I didn't make a movie with Julia, I was very, very close to her. on her 30th birthday, I gave her the tape of the Lost Angels audition. And I still have it. And I showed that tape to my class.
Oh, that's awesome. I wanted you to share the story with them because it shows that it just to have cheerleaders and to find somebody that you don't have to please everybody, but it's just about connecting with a few to help guide you through your career. So cool. I mean, that's pretty much, I really wanted you to share that story. And imagine getting a call from Dolly Parton. Jesus Christ. Cool. So I just want to thank you.
Let me tell you one more thing. It's important if you're producers. I have two talents with my nose from birth, God-given gifts. I could smell talent. So I could walk into a room with 1,000 people. I'll know who the talented people are. And that's very, very important for a producer to figure out who's the talented writer, who's the talented director, who's the talented actor. Very, very important. It's a gift. The other gift that I have is a gift for corruption. I could tell who's the bad guy. And I fucked over a lot of people who were bad guys because I knew they were bad guys. Just a hint.
Awesome. Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much. And Howard, I just want to say, and I know I say this all the time, and you're probably like, you're stalking me, but honestly, like, you are one of the most inspiring human beings I've ever come across, honestly. And I've known you for years, and you just are a force. And any writer, you should thrive to want to get Howard as a producer to one of your projects because he is your force. And you're just an amazing human being. And I adore you. And everybody, thank you so much. I hope you're as inspired as me. I have goosebumps all over my body. And everybody, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.